All right, let's get into a story that honestly feels stranger than fiction. We're going to break down how Emma Watson, the actress who was Hermione Granger for an entire generation, found herself in a massive, very public feud with the one person who created her, J.K. Rowling.
Okay, so let's just start with the moment everything exploded. This quote from J.K. Rowling wasn't just some vague comment. It was aimed squarely at Emma Watson, and it absolutely rocked the internet. But here's the thing. This didn't just come out of nowhere. This was the result of years and years of tension just bubbling under the surface until it finally boiled over. So the big question is, how did we even get here? I mean, this is the author who once said Watson was the perfect Hermione, and the actress whose entire career was launched by that character. How did they become such public adversaries? Well, to really get it, we have to rewind. We have to go all the way back to the beginning. First, let's just take a step back and remember the icon that Emma Watson became. Before all this controversy, she wasn't just an actress playing a part. For millions of people around the world, she was Hermione Granger. And her own backstory is almost as amazing as the one she played on screen. You know, her early life really set her up for this incredible journey. She was born in Paris to two British lawyers, so she had this very stable, supportive background. And from the time she was 6, she knew she wanted to act. Then, get this, at just 9 years old, with basically zero professional experience, she auditions for Hermione Granger. And J.K. Rowling herself apparently saw that first audition and just knew that's her. It was a total fairy tale. And that fairy tale beginning turned into an entire childhood lived inside a movie studio. We're talking about a full decade where her life was basically consumed by Harry Potter. Think about that for a second. 10 months out of every single year, for 10 years, she was on a film set. She literally grew up in front of the entire planet. The amount of fame and pressure on a kid that age, it's just almost impossible to imagine. And of course, with that kind of global fame came an insane amount of money. By the time that last movie came out, Emma Watson had earned an estimated $50 million. So before she was even 21 years old, she was already a bona fide A-list star and a multimillionaire. Now remember that number because this financial reality becomes absolutely crucial to understanding everything that happens next. So that brings up a really tough question. What do you do when the role of a lifetime, the thing that has defined your entire existence, ends before you've even really had a chance to live your own life? See, after a decade of being Hermione, Watson was facing a pretty serious identity crisis, and it was all going to play out in public. She tried to find some sense of normalcy. She enrolled at Brown University over in the US, trying to get a little piece of the college life she missed out on. But that shadow of Hermione Granger just followed her everywhere. There were stories of classmates literally shouting, "3 points for Gryffindor!" at her when she'd answer a question in class. She just couldn't escape the character.
And this quote right here, it just says it all. It perfectly captures the problem. She was looking for that close-knit family vibe she had on the film set, but her life experience was now on a completely different planet from her peers. I mean, here she is, a millionaire, trying to relate to college kids who are stressed about student loans. That gap, that disconnect, well, it would become a major theme in her life.
So, if you can't quite fit into the normal world and you're struggling to shed this iconic character through other acting roles, what's next? Well, for Emma Watson, the answer was to pivot. She leaned hard into activism, using her massive platform to become a voice for feminism. But this new identity, it came with a whole new set of criticisms. And you know, at first, she was incredibly successful at it. I mean, she wasn't just dabbling. She gets appointed as a UN Women Goodwill Ambassador. She's named one of Time's 100 most influential people. She's advising the G7 on women's rights. She was really building this new, serious, and very influential public persona for herself. But pretty soon, people started pointing out what they saw as major inconsistencies. For example, she once questioned whether Beyoncé's very sexualized persona could truly be considered feminist, but then, a little while later, she posed for a pretty revealing photo shoot herself in Vanity Fair. That kind of thing led to accusations of hypocrisy, that her principles weren't always consistent. And that criticism just got louder. She'd give these passionate speeches about saving the environment and fighting inequality, and then she'd turn around and be the face of a brand like Prada. For a lot of people, seeing her promote a $200 bottle of perfume just didn't square with her message. And that's when the out-of-touch label really started to stick. And that whole perception was kind of cemented by moments like this one. In a 2019 interview, instead of just saying she was single, she declared she was self-partnered. Now, look, maybe she was just trying to find a new positive way to talk about it, but the internet had a field day. The phrase was widely mocked as being pretentious and just another sign that she was living in a totally different world from most people. So you've got this search for identity, these accusations of hypocrisy, and this growing perception of being out of touch. All of that created the perfect storm. It was like a powder keg waiting for a match. And that carefully constructed activist persona was about to collide head-on with the most powerful person from her past, J.K. Rowling. And that match was lit in June of 2020. J.K. Rowling published a really long, really personal essay explaining her views on sex and gender. To many trans rights activists and their allies, the essay was seen as transphobic, and the backlash against her was immediate and it was fierce. So, Rowling drops this essay and the internet just explodes. Right away, all eyes turned to the Harry Potter cast. The pressure was on for them to pick a side. And Watson didn't waste any time. Without mentioning Rowling by name, she tweeted, "Trans people are who they say they are and deserve to live their lives without being constantly questioned." The subtext was crystal clear, and everyone saw it as a direct, public rejection of the woman who made her a star. Now, if that tweet was kind of a subtle shot, the tension escalated into a full-blown public spectacle 2 years later at the BAFTA Awards. This wasn't some little Twitter spat anymore. This was happening on a massive stage on live TV. The host introduced Watson with a little joke about her being a witch. When Watson walked on stage, she looked right at the camera and said with very pointed emphasis, "I'm for all the witches." The way she stressed that word all, oh man, everybody knew exactly who she was talking about. The clip went absolutely viral, and it was seen by everyone as another public dig at Rowling. Now, for years, through all of this, J.K. Rowling had stayed publicly silent about the criticism from Watson and the other actors. But you can only poke the bear so many times. And recently, after Watson gave another interview talking about the situation, Rowling apparently decided she had finally had enough. She broke her silence. And her response, it wasn't just some angry tweet. It was a methodical and pretty devastating takedown. She accused Watson of basically using their old relationship to publicly dunk on her. And then came the bombshell. She revealed that at that very same BAFTA Awards ceremony, Watson had privately passed her a note saying she was sorry for what she was going through. Rowling painted this as the ultimate act of insincerity. She called Watson ignorant, protected by her wealth, and then delivered the final blow. She accused her of siding with activists who were sending credible death threats her way. It was a complete and total dismantling of Watson's activist image. So, where does all this leave us? Well, it's messy. This public fight doesn't just damage a personal relationship. It casts a really complicated shadow over the legacy of one of the most beloved stories of all time. It kind of forces fans to look at both the creator and the star of Harry Potter in a completely new light. When you look at it from the perspective of her critics, the whole thing comes down to an identity that's just constantly shifting. The perception is that in this desperate attempt to escape the massive shadow of Hermione Granger, Watson has sort of tried on different personas. The college student, the serious actress, the global activist, each one aligning with whatever the current social trend was. And that journey is what ultimately led her right into this massive public clash. And really, this whole saga leaves us with a much bigger, more fascinating question that goes way beyond just these two people. When you become world famous for playing one character during your most formative years, is it even possible to find an identity that's truly your own? Or are you, and we as the audience, just forever connected to the magic of who you used to be?